It's a bye week for the Houston Cougars. That doesn't mean there's not football to pay attention to this weekend. Houston, Oregon State is next on the docket. What do the Beavers bring to the table?
You are Locked On Cougs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Cougs, the daily podcast about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Ainsworth, and whether a Houston fan or just a hater who came to stop by, thank you for making Locked On Cougs your first listen of the day. Page me your first listen each and every day. If you want to join the conversation but you don't know what to say, tell us in the comments down below what your favorite snack from Buc-ee's is, because we're talking about eating up some beaver next weekend. Now, I want to tell you all about today's episode previewing Oregon State way too early, but you got a chance to watch them this weekend, so I want to help make sure you know what to watch for in today's episode that is brought to you by Mazda. Now, I got to be honest, I didn't know a lot about Oregon State until I started diving a little bit deeper, and when I was diving deeper, I ran into a show called PAC-12 Daily, and after some quick texting, I decided to bring in host of PAC-12 Daily, Christian Rauh, to talk to us a little bit about how those Oregon State Beavers have started the year. Christian, have you ever been to a Buc-ee's? Is that even a question I can even ask?
I wish I have, man. I've seen the signs. I've never been. So I know there's a lot of really cool things at Buc-ee's, and I'm definitely missing out.
Well, their mascot's the beaver, a lot like Oregon State. That was my segue. I want to talk first about Oregon State being 0-4 and what's gone wrong there. I want to ask, frankly, what a win like for them would look like, because I'm sure they're trying to win games. I don't mean to judge them too hard. And then I know you host Pac-12 Daily. I want to ask in a more roundabout way, like, do they need to get out of the Pac-12? Should they join the Big 12 and see what happens there? Is this a sinking ship maybe that needs some more resources? But first, Oregon State is over. And I don't mean that in an OSU kind of way. I mean, they have not won a game this year thus far. And frankly, it doesn't look like they're going to do anything this weekend. They play Oregon in a great rivalry game, but when they're heavy underdogs in. And Christian, how does that happen in this program that has put out a decent amount of NFL talent in the last 20 years?
Yeah, it's been a really rough roller coaster since the change of the old Pac-12 and what's going to become the new Pac-12 in July of 2026. They're kind of right in the middle of it, but Oregon State's really suffering. And you can point fingers if you want. If you want to say it's at the head coach, Trent Bray, that was the defensive coordinator, former linebacker with the program back in the mid 2000s, and then becomes the head coach. Since then, heading up into this game against Oregon, the Civil War this weekend, he's 5-10. He was 5-7 on the season last year, now 5-10 in his collegiate coaching career at Oregon State. Now, with the most likely inevitable loss to Oregon here, it's probably going to be a pretty rough game, to be honest with you, unless things change. We can talk about those keys to victory in just a moment, but he's probably going to be 5-11. So not only are we potentially talking an over, Parker, there might be a really small narrative here that we should talk about right now, a way too early narrative that potentially when they're getting ready for Houston, they might have an interim head coach.
This is a way too early preview, so let's jump into it. How realistic is that? He, as you mentioned, played there at a better time in the program's history. He was a defensive coordinator they promoted to head coach. They liked him at some point as a coach. It doesn't feel like they like him anymore, and at 5-10 going on 5-11, if you don't do math, 5-7 last year, 5-10 this year means they're 0-3 on the year, right? What's shifted besides just not winning, or is it just as simple as they're not winning?
It's execution is just not there. They're making a lot of mistakes. I mean, the game against Cal to start the season, they had a lot of bonehead mistakes. The game against Fresno State, they had so many special teams blunders. It was just absolutely outrageous, to the fact where Trent Bray was throwing F-bombs at the halftime press conference, heading off the field, going to the locker room on national television. Now, he did apologize. I'll give that out there. But overall, there was just there's just a lack of confidence in what potentially could be a loss of the locker room at Oregon State. And that's huge, especially going into this rivalry game against Oregon. That's something that you have to, of course, have. You bring in a good transfer quarterback in Maalik Murphy, who was with Duke last year. You think that he can step up and do it, but the weapons just aren't there. But the weapons, I should take that back. The weapons are there, but they're putting themselves in such a big hole with so many penalties. Like, for example, the game against Texas Tech last week, on the first play of the game, they had a false start. They had 2 false starts on the opening drive. And then there was a 2.5-hour weather delay, and all that did was just delay the inevitable of Texas Tech taking care of Oregon State and moving them to 0-3. There's a strong potential chance. I think the fact with the firing of Coach Foster in UCLA, and of course at the coach at Virginia Tech, but most likely the West Coast one being the one that really matters the most, really makes you think if Oregon State has to make a change right away, because those same candidates that are going to be after UCLA are also going to be candidates that Oregon State's looking at. So this might be something that if they think it's time to move on, it might happen sooner than later, and it might be before they even get to this game against the Coogs.
I know you host Pac-12 Daily, and they're no longer in the Pac-12, but do you think UCLA and Virginia Tech firing their coaches first makes this easier, or does it even matter for an Oregon State?
Easier as in maybe making the decision faster? I would say yes, but I think, when you're talking about the fan base and of course the feeling of, trustworthiness and trying to protect an alumni, I think that makes it tough. But knowing that I think it makes it a lot easier for the administration to say we have to make a move now if they can't bounce back, which against Oregon, or maybe they give them one more chance against Houston to make that happen. Eventually, if they do lose against Oregon this week, they'll be heading into that game against Houston 5-11 with a Trent Bray record so far as a career. You can't have that. You can't have that happening. So if I was going to say that the administration, after seeing, UCLA's coach being fired, and some of the candidates that you want to reach out to, and some of those candidates are going to be exactly the same candidates that UCLA is looking at, the same type of recruiting pipeline, I think you make a move faster than you do if UCLA never did that.
Well, and I asked that mostly because, and look, obviously, Houston at their program right now is not Oregon. I think Houston's building fast, but Oregon is Oregon. I feel like, honestly, if I were trying to fire my coach, though, I might not pick post-Oregon, pre-Houston. When I look at their schedule, I might pick like post-Wake Forest, pre-Lafayette, kind of like a softer landing to the new guy. They play Lafayette, Wazoo, and Sam Houston. Bam, bam, bam. That you could easily be 2-1 after that for the new guy, and kind of feel good about who you got, right? And that one to Washington State, you get to play them again at the end of the season. And I wonder if the exacerbation of that would happen if we're talking about this on Monday morning, right? This is the way too early. If it's just the normal preview on Monday morning, if there's some speeding up of that, because the candidates that you mentioned are all the same kinds of candidates. Presumably, that means the intern would be on staff. You can't bring in someone that fast for the Houston game. If that happens after the Oregon game, that'd be crazy. Who on staff do you imagine it would be, and what changes with the program? You're shaking your head. Is there any hope?
No, that's the tough part. If they do wind up going and taking care of business and going and moving on from Trent Bray, it'll have to be a clean house situation. Special teams coordinator has been rough. There's already been talks about sticking with him so far this season. The offense has probably been the biggest concern of why Trent Bray has not been seen as a head coach, of him not making a move at moving out from the offensive coordinator. And Trent Bray is actually also the defensive coordinator. So if they're going to move on from him, it would be an interim coach, probably at a lower level. It would be definitely punting on the season. So you're probably right. It would be probably something that would happen at the bye week or later on. But with this new world of college athletics, NIL, transfer portal, especially with the new news that came out just a few days ago about only switching to a single portal, that it is going to be paramount that if you want a new coach and you don't want to lose any of your recruits, or you want to make sure you have the upper hand on preparing for the next year, which is the first year of the new Pac-12, July 2026, is when all the new teams go, and they'll have 8 teams to compete against inside the new Pac-12. You got to find a way to get an upper edge. And if you don't think Trent Bray is that answer for next season and beyond, I think you have to make that move sooner than later. I know that we probably shouldn't continue to talk about always Trent Bray, but that is the biggest narrative for Oregon State right now.
Well, and it certainly, as we're talking about this way too early preview, could be the biggest storyline for them on Monday morning. Now, if they were to upset Oregon and have a different storyline, or just in general, that would require a certain player we've already mentioned once in this episode playing very well. And I want to talk to you about him in just a second and what a win looks like whenever it happens for Oregon State at some point. But before we get too far, today's show is brought to you by our buddies over at Mazda. Now, folks who listen to the show for a long time know that I love talking about Mazda because I actually drive a Mazda, and it helps move the game forward. For those who believe it's not just about playing the game, but redefining it. Moments do more than put points on the board, than move crowds, culture, and keep the game moving forward. Now, listen, I think there's all kinds of highlight plays you could pull on from last week for Connor Wigman. I am picking the play that moved this program forward when he dusted that poor linebacker that had a family, Connor. You didn't have to do it to him on national television, but you did it to him on Friday night in front of everyone, juked him out of his shoes and went into the end zone. Let the world know that he can, Connor Wickman, that is, can run too. When you follow up moves, you the unexpected is only the beginning. And just like there's more to every highlight, there's more to a Mazda vehicle. Mazda, move and be moved. Today's show is also brought to you by our buddies over at Wayfair. Now, the weather's been cooling down. Days getting a little bit cooler. I promise it's coming, Texans. It's coming. And that has me wanting to make that outdoor spot, that patio spot, just a little bit cozier when it's finally cool enough to go outside and enjoy it. When it comes to cozifying your space this fall, Wayfair is the place to go. Wayfair has everything you need to set the mood for the season, whether it's the comfy recliners, warm bedding, autumn decor, or even an espresso machine. You can make your favorite latte at home. Also, please invite me for lattes at some point. Now, listen, we moved to a house about a year ago, and about a year into a house, you kind of figure out what you need. We're looking for all kinds of things for our outdoor spaces and areas as fall is coming up. We want to have a nice, toddler space to run around. We sit there with a couple beverages, have a good time. Wayfair is the place to do that. Cozify your space with Wayfair. Their curated collection offers easy, affordable fall updates from comfy recliners, cozy bedding, and the autumn decor. You can find all for way less at wayfair.com. That's Wayfair, Wayfair.com. Wayfair, every style, every home. Parker Angel joined by Pac-12 Daily's Christian Rauh. Christian, I look at this Oregon State team, and I look at their schedule, and I know they're 0 for 3 right now, probably going 0 for 4. I don't think they're going winless. I don't know what a win looks like, and I think it's going to rely heavily on Maalik Murphy, the quarterback. Now, Christian, I don't know if you know this background, but Cougar fans may remember that name because he played at Texas back when Houston played against Texas. In the first year, Houston was in the Big 12. The last year, Texas was in the Big 12. He was the backup quarterback to Quinn Ewers. Quinn famously, Houston nearly wins that game. I don't mean to relive it for folks this is painful for, but setting context here, there was a fairly bad spot. The official was supposed to review it, may have a degree from Texas that actually it's a thing, right? And did not get reviewed. Bad spot on third down, then didn't make it on fourth down. Houston loses the ball game. But in that ball game, Quinn Ewers had to set out a couple drives hurt. He got checked out or whatever. The backup quarterback that came in for him was Maalik Murphy. Houston's seen him before. What does he do for them to win a game this year? Even if it's not Oregon, what will a win for them entail?
Yeah, he's a playmaker, and he's an excellent quarterback. There's a reason why he was highly souted after when Duke decided to go in a different direction with bringing in the guy from Tulane, Mensa. Now, he wound up staying with going to Oregon State. I don't know if that's going to wind up being the best decision for him, but last year he was great at Duke, almost threw for 3,000 yards, 26 touchdowns, 12 interceptions. But that's where it really gets you, that ratio, that TD to interception. He's a playmaker, but he's also very aggressive. So call it a playmaker with a fault. So far this season, he's already almost thrown for 1,000 yards. That is something that's probably been the best portion that we've seen from Oregon State so far, is when he is on. He's thrown 6 touchdowns, but he's also thrown 5 interceptions. Now, a couple of those were trying to be some game winners, trying to play hero ball towards the end of the game when you were down, especially against Fresno State. So take that for what you will. But overall, Maalik Murphy, I think, is going to be one of the biggest keys to sticking it to potentially, keeping it close against Oregon and sticking into the game against Houston, potentially giving them their first loss of the season if it happens down that route. I think Maalik Murphy is definitely a key, but I do think if we're going to go anywhere, I think it's the defense that has to definitely change and definitely improve, Parker.
Well, I want to hear about that because honestly, I think Maalik Murphy, I don't want to say regression. That feels way too personal when truthfully, as you mentioned, there's a lot of circumstances to this. He also has had trouble running the ball, which implies he's getting sacked a lot. Again, we're going to learn a lot more about him as Cougar fans this weekend when we watch him a little bit more closely.
Yep.
But the defense, they've lost their fair share of games, so I don't mean to say that they're playing impeccably, but held Fresno to 36, held Cal to 34, and for what it's worth, I know that Tech has not played a whole lot of other talented teams. Holding Tech to 45 feels like it's worth something right now. What can you tell us about that defense? Not that they're going to hold Oregon under 50, but like that seems to be something they feel better about than their offense.
Yeah, I mean, they have great players on their team. They have some good players in the trenches like Thomas Collins. They have some good players in the secondary like Skylar Thomas. I mean, they get it done. But the thing is that it hasn't been consistent. And when we're talking about Trent Bray, not to bring him back up again like we did the entire first segment here, Parker, but when we were talking about Trent Bray, the identity that he has, of course, tried to instill in Oregon State is being a tough defense. Well, unfortunately, that's not working for him so far this season. He's 111th in the country in total defense, allowing 424.3 yards per game. To put that in perspective, since we're talking about coaches potentially being fired, UCLA was 117th in total defense, and Virginia Tech was 124th. So right around that same area of not being good and potentially showing why a team with a defensive mastermind type head coach and Trent Bray being on the hot seat without question. So I think you have to find a way to improve on the defensive side. And you got to be creative, meaning you have to probably get some stunts, some blitzes, some pressures, and cause chaos, cause mayhem, cause turnovers, because so far this season, Oregon State has not done themselves any favors. They have been making bonehead mistakes on all three facets of the football game: offense, defense, special teams. They got to make sure they're not the only ones having bonehead mistakes, and they have to cause some issues. And I think that's the only way they keep it close with the Ducks, and that's the only way that they find a way to stay competitive with the Coogs next week.
Well, and so it sounds like defense, run the ball, don't turn it over. Very simple, for lack of a better phrase, ugly football is kind of what both these teams want to do. Houston fans, I think, like the old Case Keenum days, the run and shoot days from way, way back. Even Greg Ward and H-Town Takeover was scoring a bunch of points per game. That's not what the Wilfred's era is going to be, but it's certainly going to win some games, as we're seeing. Do you think that Oregon State can play that kind of a game at a Power 4 level?
It's tough. It's really tough to think they can. I know they're towards the bottom of the entire college football when it comes to turnover margin. I think they're tied for 107th in the country when it comes to turnover margin. I think that's the number I wrote down for that. I don't have that page up on me at the moment, but either way, they're struggling. They're certainly struggling. Here's the best part for Oregon State is that it can't get any worse, I don't think. I think they're at their floor. So maybe that means they're a dangerous team. Maybe that means that Trent Bray has nothing to lose and that entire coaching staff has nothing to lose. Maalik Murphy is trying to make himself look like an NFL prospect. There's a couple other great offensive weapons on that team as well. Walker is a great wide receiver, very underrated wide receiver in all of college football, not just the Pac-12 or in the West Coast. Hankerson, the running back, you should remember him from being a Colorado former guy. Of course, yeah, I know you too well about Colorado, just taking care of them last week. But he hasn't really stepped up. But he has been the guy that has been seen as potentially a big weapon on this team. Unfortunately, he's only averaged less than 4 yards a carry this year, only got 190 yards. He struggled in a couple of those football games this year.
So I don't mean to sit on that too much, but he's a name that coming into the season had 1,000 yards last year, led the team in carries. He's still leading the team in carries by a gigantic margin. I should point out he is the guy, but not having the same kind of success. Is that a challenging opening to the schedule, or is something else different?
Well, he was great against Fresno State. He was exactly what you would expect for him to be against Fresno State. 25 carries. I think it was almost 140 yards, if I remember correctly, but struggled against Cal. Cal might actually just turn out to be a really good team this year. Who knows? Their schedule actually looks really good too. Lots of things to keep an eye. If you're thinking ACC, keep your eye on Cal. Just little insider baseball there, Parker. But and then Texas Tech. I mean, Texas Tech, he only got 12 yards. So maybe it's just the level of competition. When he played Fresno State, he showed that he could be the running back that everybody expected him to be. But so far, it hasn't lived up to be exactly what they needed for Oregon State. Now, again, it goes on back to those same bonehead mistakes, the offense getting the football at the wrong times, and being down so fast because of those mistakes, then you completely get away and run away from the run. You have to use Maalik Murphy and Maalik Murphy only. So if they can stay a little bit more competitive, which they probably will not happen this weekend, just to keep it transparent and blunt, you probably won't see the same stats like you did from Fresno State, from Hankerson as well this weekend.
Well, I want to talk about keeping it competitive, how Oregon could be a measure for a lot of things, and kind of look at, does Oregon State need to make big moves aside from coaching change like that in just 1 second. Before we get to all that, Christian, today's show is brought to you by our buddies over at Square. Now, this episode is brought to you by Square, your favorite neighborhood spots run on Square. There's certain businesses that truly make the neighborhood feel like home, whether it's a local sports bar packed on game days, coffee shop knows your order by heart, or the corner deli that's been serving your community for decades. These are places that bring people together. What neighborhood drives, when neighborhood businesses thrive, the whole neighborhood can thrive. Square has used your local places like Roost Coffee, 6th Street Cafe and Pizza, all kinds of places around Houston. It is truly a place for a app for local places to stay afloat and stay on top of their finances. Square is a proud partner of more than 4 million neighborhood businesses around the world. You go to square.com/go/locked-on-college to learn more. Before you go to support your favorite neighborhood spot. You'll be happy you did. Square. See you in the neighborhood. Today's show is brought to you also by our buddies at DoorDash. Now, listen, it's about to be the weekend. Time to look back at last week. Last time we saw Houston Cougar football in action, the MVP was Connor Wegman. Again, I'm telling you every single day because it's just that impactful. Powered by DoorDash, just like you win every Saturday with DoorDash Streaks, saving more every time you order. These players deliver when it mattered most. Let's break it down. Connor Wegman showed off the arm and the legs, and we talked about it all week here at Locked On Cougs. But that adds an element to this offense that you just cannot ignore and other people can't ignore. And that means there's so many more open avenues and possibilities for what offensive coordinator Slade Nagel wants to do, thanks to Connor Wegman. Now, no hesitations and delays. If you've been watching week after week, you know this is more of something he's built up to and not just a fluke. Connor Wegman is on a streak, and just like Connor Wegman delivered for the Cougs, DoorDash delivers your Saturdays with DoorDash Streaks. You can save every Saturday you order, stack it up all season, and you could save up $250, including $100 back in DoorDash credits. Order this Saturday. Keep the streak alive. Fuel your game day only with DoorDash Streaks. Terms apply. Promo code goes through November 18th. Parker Angel Locked On Cougs here, bringing on Christian Rauh. Christian, host of PAC-12 Daily. Christian, I know you're a host of PAC-12 Daily, and so you may just tell me to buzz off. But I think this weekend you're going to see Oregon beat the doors off of Oregon State. To be fair to what I'm about to say, they did the exact same thing to the Big 12's Oklahoma State. Here's the big difference in that to me. Oklahoma State's about to make a lot more money this season. They got an expensive coach. They may fire him and pay his buyout. And I don't think Oregon State could do that with a Mike Gundy-sized contract buyout. I just don't. I don't think that the resources are thinner up there, even with the new Pac-12 coming and all the new things that are happening. I've got hypotheses on that too. But even with the new Pac-12 coming, does Oregon State need to look to get involved with someone like the Big 12? The ACC has West Coast teams now, which doesn't make any sense, but they do. Do they need to get out of this thing?
Need is an interesting word. I don't know if I would go to need. Would it benefit them? I could see in the short term, potentially, right? I have a lot of faith in this new Pac-12. So that's where I'm going here. That's probably the closest to me saying buzz off as I'll actually go here. But I have a lot of faith in that new Pac-12. I think bringing in the schools, Boise State, Utah State, Texas State, Fresno State, San Diego State, Gonzaga for hoops, I think can be really interesting and really fun for this new Pac-12. It has good branding. And then you also have to remember that Oregon State and Washington State were the founding members of this new team. They were instrumental in architecting this new Pac-12, which kind of pushes away any thoughts of going to a different power conference. And I don't think there's ever been an offer on the table, at least not in the latest, because of all those new things that has happened with the Pac-12. And I don't think that's something that's going to be. So when you're talking hypotheticals, it's hard for me to say, yes, they should move on. But could it benefit them in the short term if that was an option? Maybe, because I think the Pac-12 thing is going to be something that is a slow burn to making themselves hopefully potentially back into what is seen as a power conference. It's going to take a very long time for that to happen if it does. But I think if you're going to do it, it has to start with teams like Wazoo and like Oregon State.
We've talked firing Coach Bray up and down, so we don't need to break that down too much more. But I do think it's interesting because, look, I just don't remember them being this uncompetitive in the Pac-12. When the Pac-12 was a Power 5 conference, they felt like they were they had to quit the Rogers brothers. They'd upset Oregon every now and then. Like they were constantly in the 8-9 win area. It felt like, and maybe that's just me misremembering things or misdiagnosing things, because Houston was in the group of 5 back then, and I'm about to say group of 6. They were in the group of 5 back then, and building towards a Big 12 invite ultimately. But I just don't remember it looking like this, and I feel like a big part of that is them getting left out of all that realignment a couple years ago.
Yeah, and it could be for sure. I mean, you're also seeing it not be super beneficial for teams that have went to the ACC from that old Pac-12 and Stanford and Cal, right? And UCLA and the Big Ten hasn't really worked out so far, how far they fell, right? So I don't know if it's always greener on the other side as much as you'd like to think it is, because with this new realignment of college football, some conferences are probably going to fall apart. I think the Pac-12, with how they're building this new conference back up, I actually think they're in good shape compared to a couple other conferences, like potentially the ACC. I don't know if the ACC is in good spots in comparison to the new Pac-12 because of some of the media deals that are going here. I like to point at in the Oregon State world of realm of why they're not successful. It all started when Trent Bray was promoted, and I wouldn't say all started, but it definitely enhanced. But not in the not because of Trent Bray. I think Trent Bray is an excellent defensive mastermind. I think he's one of the best defensive coordinators that Oregon State has ever had. Maybe just not head coach material. And there's multiple players, multiple people in this program across the country in the history of college football that we can put that on that list that are great coordinators. But when Jonathan Smith left Oregon State to go to Michigan State, in 2023, at the end of 2023, I think that's when it really changed and a lot of issues started with this program.
Well, and to Bray's credit, as a defensive guy, I saw on offense that Maalik Murphy was the multi-time transfer. Hankerson transferred from Colorado, and I was like, "Oh, who's the defensive guy like that?" They returned or originally had like this is not a transfer-built defense by any stretch. Guys that play for him like playing for him. It looks like, just based on the fact that they stay even after things like the Pac-12 falling apart initially, right? And I look at like, well, then what else could it be, and wonder if it is conference realignment, or maybe it's just a blip. Maybe the new Pac-12 revives the entire thing. But obviously, the Big 12 is always open for business, and it invites the question. So we've heard, and so it opens the door to all of that. Christian, you host a lot of things, but Pac-12 Daily is a show that is relatively new and covering this entire conference kind of before it even starts, really. What's going on in a busy world that is the Pac-12?
Yeah, July 2026 is officially when the new Pac-12 starts, but I didn't want to wait around. I wanted to cover these new teams with the 8 new college football teams, plus Gonzaga, plus Dallas Baptist, DBU going to be there for baseball as well. I know we were talking in a Texas show. I didn't forget about them. There's a lot of exciting things to talk about with this new conference, and there's some very rabid and amazing fan bases out here on the West Coast and in the Midwest, if you will, with some of these teams as well. So there's a lot of exciting stuff happening with this conference, with the new changes of realignment. There just wasn't enough coverage, and I want to make sure that they were getting talked about. And that's exactly what we do daily on the Pac-12 Daily.
I have said for a minute now that if Houston fans were going to make one road trip this season, Corvallis is the place to go because it's unique, it's new, it's different. You don't know what's going to happen again. If any Cougar fans heading up there a week from now, any recommendations before we get out of here?
Oh man, Corvallis is a really nice spot. I mean, just enjoy it the way you can. There's always really good weather when you get to it. At least right now, like you haven't got to the little too far in the fall, so just enjoy it the way you can because Corvallis, Eugene, and Corvallis are really nice spots in Oregon. But of course, talking about the Beavers here, yeah, check it out for sure.
Head up to Corvallis. If you can't, we'll be breaking things down here all week long leading up to the game and live afterwards. It's a late kickoff in the state of Texas, actually. It's like 9:30 local time. But we'll be up late talking about it. Probably have a few mentioned
Pac-12
coffee a
after
couple of
dark.
times. Yeah, Pac-12 after dark in a lot of ways. This has been Locked On Coogs. That's your Christian Rauh of Pac-12 Daily. Thank you again for listening each and every day. For a second listen, go check out Locked On Big 12. Listen to Drake talk about cavities and not the kind you get fixed at the dentist. Today, Locked On Cougs, Locked On Podcast. I'm your team every day. Go Cougs.